Welcome to another episode of Distory with Kate and Kirk. My name is Kirk from walruscarp.com, and this evening we are going to be heading again onto Track A of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Walt Disney World, the defunct ride that we still can't get out of, even though it's long gone. So we're going to get long gone out of Track A today. We have a lot to go through. We just left the fortune teller camp. We're heading down the one-way street into Town Square, Winky's Pub, Weasels in the Storeroom, Countryside, Railroad Crossing, the Blackout section, into the train, NHE double hockey sticks, and we dones. With me to get through this as quickly as humanly possible. Honestly, the truth is a lot of this stuff is repeat, although we do have some fun little extras and tidbits as we go through. But to explore this is the wonderful Kate, the Disney Cicerone. Kate, are we awake this evening?
I am, and I'm very, very excited for this one, especially because it's going to be a bit of a sprint through the rest of this ride, only because you and I are just like, hey, we got to speed it up just a little bit. So we're still going to see all the details. We're not leaving anything out. We're still doing what we always do, but we're going
to skip every detail.
We're like, there was this ride called Mr. Toad.
The end. We'll see you next week.
Let's jump right on into this because we got a lot to cover. So here is the layout for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And you can see we've already been through Toad Hall, the trophy room, into the kitchen, here on the left side into the gypsy camp. And now we're headed into the one-way street. So that gives you kind of an idea of where we're going. And Kirk's going to take us here in on video and show us what it looks like going through the ride.
So here's the end of the gypsy camp, and we're about to hit the last Romani person who's hanging out of the wagon. So we're about to blast right through this wagon. It says, go back, wrong way, detour, do not enter. And there's lots of so this hallway is basically all pitch black. And then you have these black lit illuminated signs all over the place. And some of them are, your typical traffic sign. And then a lot of these are just kooky little one-way detour, all those kinds of things. All right, we're going to go through the tunnel and I'm going to try to say signage as fast as humanly possible. And then we'll go back to the still shots and take a more detailed approach to this. Wrong way. Do not enter. One way, detour, stop, go back, detour, danger, smash. Okay.
Yep. That's pretty much it.
I'm good.
And that's pretty much all I really saw there. Do you want to talk more about the specific pictures for them? I think I have a close-up of that one.
Yeah, I have one that I'm sharing right now that shows, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly why they selected this type of signage, but there is a yellow background sign that's circular in nature, but it has arrows pointing up, down, left, right. So 4 different directions. And it says in blue lettering, one way, which is very confusing to me. I'm not sure why they selected that. But then you also see blasting, which is foreshadowing for the future. And I think also danger for the future as we're going to get into a powder room a little bit later down. Does have a do not enter one-way danger road construction, which also, again, will be subtle foreshadowing when we get to the countryside. On the left-hand side, I don't know is that curves ahead? What are we writing here? It's not curves.
Something.
Eaves ahead?
I can't tell. And let me see it. Let me look on mine real quick, see if I can
No,
see
I think it's curves. I think it's curves. I think it's RVES in this. And the signage itself is kind of like an S curve, so that would make sense. And this whole entire track is one big undulating curve.
Yeah, I think what we're actually looking at is track B. That's a perspective from track B, which is fine because it's almost the same both ways. The signs are slightly different, but I think it's fine to talk about that. But yeah, it also says danger road construction. But the interesting part about this is if they dispatch the vehicles at the correct time and they dispatch them together from both track A and track B, you would see the other car coming towards you with their headlights
directly at you.
Like your guys are going to collide. And then you can see here on Kirk's screen that you'll see that the tracks actually do pivot at the last second and then go into Town Square. So it's almost as if you do collide with that car, but then at the last second you kind of pivot away. And I think that's the what they're trying to get across with that one-way sign is that you're going the wrong way down a one-way. That's all.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is like because it's mirrored, the other person thinks they're going the wrong way on a one way as well.
That's true.
So like technically, like we're both doing the wrong thing, which is impossible.
Yeah,
just to let you know.
Because here, this is from the other side. So this is from track A on that I'm showing here, and there is another one that says one way. I think it's just the back side of that exact same sign is also painted the exact same way with the 4 arrows in the one way.
Yeah, I mean, why make 2 signs when you can just print the other one? Because if you see there's another sign I'm just noticing now that's in like a dark royal blue with orange lettering that says one way, and it's showing left and right. So again, the one way always is multi-directional in Mr. Toad's.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. On this side, we also get a sign that says bumpy that looks like it's going over bumps, which I think is funny as well. And I wanted to just talk very, very briefly about the typography of this because Rolly Crump's style is all over these signs. He did a lot of things that were these wavy, bold, psychedelic 60s style lettering that we see here. Really, if you think about it, you kind of associate it more with like hippie culture, right? And so I have some interesting album covers from this era to show you to kind of see the style of lettering that they had, the typography that they had at this time. This one's from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Are You Experienced? And you can kind of see these wavy psychedelic lettering that's kind of stretched and distorted. I also have, this is The Who. So this is the Magic Bus, The Who on Tour from 1968. And this one, you definitely see these kind of like,
oh, that's fun.
Yeah, the letters that are kind of like definitely stretched, elongated, and look, I think psychedelic is my best word for these. But I also really love this one. This is Joni Mitchell. She's one of my favorites. And the style here is less like stretched psychedelic. It's more like, oh gosh, it's highly detailed and lots of lines making all of these different shapes. Here you see Joni Mitchell, there's this like, her hair is flowing and she's got all these designs in her hair and then all these flowers. And this to me also definitely screams Rolly Crump because if you see his style here, you can see some of his artwork on the wall behind him. And it definitely has that feel from that like Joni Mitchell album. So you can see in this hippie culture, he was heavily influenced by all of these things in hippie culture, but especially I wanted to focus on the typography that we see in this area with the one-way signs because it's all Rolly Crump.
Moving away from text, but you totally made a connection in my brain that I never would have. So the synapses fired and I immediately had to pull up a picture of the ending of Small World.
Oh, yeah.
And even the one-way sign, it mirrors a lot of the goodbye sign that I have pulled up right now. So I don't know. It has like this similar kind of directional vibe with a circular center with 4 points extending out from it. Even the Zaijian, which I'm assuming is goodbye in probably Mandarin or something. So
that's interesting. You know, it does have a similar style, and that
right. Even adios similar. Like they're very much alike.
I wonder how much Rolly Crump was involved in that specific part of the attraction and how much it's changed since the 1970s as well.
Yeah, who knows? I bet if I looked at 1970s photos, it'd be way cooler and more of an inference if I could find a photo. I might have to try to see if I can find that because that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thanks for pulling that up. I think he's, of course, Rolly Crump was involved with Small World. He did all of the toys that you see in Small World, a lot of the creatures. We talked about that when we were in the trophy room with the hippo. So that's fascinating. I'm glad that you pulled those two together. Thank you for mentioning that. All right. Do you have anything else for the one-way street area? Are we good to move on?
No, we could go right into Town Square if that's cool with you.
At this point, let's head on into Town Square. I have the layout here pulled up just to show you how this actually works because both Track A and Track B do enter Town Square together at this point. Track A is on the left, Track B is on the right, and they enter in, but like Track A kind of makes a smaller circle around the centerpiece of this room and then out into the pub, whereas Track B actually makes a wider berth around the right side of the room and then out the back through the jail. So, Kirk, do you want to take us in on a video into Town Square?
Let's do it to it. All right, so we're heading, again, remember, this is the detour. Oh, we get a little flash on this one. Hang on. There's a little tiny flash of there's like a split frame where we get to see a car. So it's going to be a quick snap. So just focus on it. And then we make a hard left and we'll be right into town square. And then we'll start be winding around same exact, statue. So hang on. I'm just going to play it. And boom, there they are.
Yeah.
It's like real quick. All right, I'm going to stop. So now we're into town square.
Yeah. And I think this is an earlier, some earlier footage before the 1990s, 1993 refurb, because there was, the sign is actually different than it is later on. So,
well, the first thing that we see come into frame, and this is like a mirror replica, unless you found pictures that look very different, but the Cyril Proudbottom holding Mr. Toad on his hoof in the center as a fountain statue seems similar.
yeah. So, here is what it looks like. You can see there's a keep off the grass sign down below. This is not a fountain like it is in Disneyland, like we talked about when we did the 1983 one. It's not a fountain. It's just a statue. It's not sitting on like a little mound of grass with a keep off the grass sign that is like
statue
blue, blue with red lettering, which like, if you're a graphic designer, you know, like that's like a really harsh contrast that sometimes like plays tricks with your eyes to have it be like that. So I don't know if that was intentional to do that, but they definitely changed it later, because you can see in this photo, they have keep off the grass is actually like a light blue background with almost like orange lettering for keep off the grass and like actual pictures of grass on either side of the sign. So they changed it later, probably for like visual economy, because it's so you're only going to see it for a split second and it's really hard to see that darker sign. So I think
the one with the blades of grass is a lot cooler.
Yeah, for sure. I also have a little note about the lampposts in this section, if you don't mind, for a quick rabbit trail. I found this on an auction site that rather than create new lampposts, Raleigh had the idea to order a few existing lampposts from Disneyland to incorporate into the Walt Disney World ride. After installing the lamppost in the attraction, this one was left over, and rather than throw it out, Raleigh used it as a functional light fixture in his home. This incredible prop has a fiberglass body with a metal support in the center. The lamppost measures approximately 11 feet tall. So this is actually the photo of the lamp from the auction site, which came from the attraction, which you can see them here. And I was like, well, this is a fascinating story that these lamps actually like came from Disneyland or were ordered from the same place that did the Disneyland ones. And I was like, I've never seen lamps like this before. So I had to do a little bit of a deep dive to try to figure out what's going on with them. Before we do that, I just wanted to point out that this is what the statue looks like in the Disneyland version that didn't come in until 1983. So the Disneyland Cyril Proudbottom statue is actually taken from this attraction from Walt Disney World, and then they just added a fountain around it later. So just to show you them kind of side by side there. But the lamps themselves, I did a...
Wait, you're telling me Walt Disney World is in Disneyland?
No.
Did you say the Cyril statue was brought over?
I said
no.
So the Cyril statue was first in Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
In 1971, and then they brought it over to Disneyland in 1983 for Mr. Toad.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is you're telling me Walt Disney World is technically in Disneyland?
So there's a lot of things
that
were brought over in the 1983 refurb.
Yeah, but that statue's a pretty big part of that ride.
Yeah, well, so is the pirate ship is in Peter Pan. That was also brought over from Walt Disney World's version of Peter Pan. That didn't exist in Disneyland before the 1983 refurb.
And to me, I rest my case. Disneyland couldn't exist without the amazing additions of Walt Disney World.
Nice try.
You have no idea how mad Kate is right now. Like, that is the least
silly,
effective argument.
Silly.
Anyway, it did plus Mr. Toad, though. I'm just saying.
Okay, let me talk about my lamps. So I did a little bit of research on these lamps because I was like, where in the world are they? So this is a picture of the Plaza Hub for Disneyland. This is circa 1955-56, because you can still see that it says 10-cent fare there on the trolley. But the lamps here at this point they only have like globe tops to them, which those ones still kind of exist here in Disneyland today. But you can see in the hub here, they had the globe lamps here as well. And I was like, okay, well, how long were they here? And so I went through history, and it wasn't until much, much later that we have these lamps show up that actually have these like 2 bars on the sides and then have plant hangers on them. But they look more like these lamps that are in inside this ride for Mr. Toad, but they're not exactly the same. So this was the best version that I could find for if they maybe had them modeled after ones that were in Disneyland, but even the base is different because the base for Mr. Toad has like diamonds on the bottom and this one does not. So, I mean, you can kind of still see the shape of it is similar, but they're definitely not the same. This is not the exact same lamp, but it's possible that it was from some other area. I'm like Carnation Plaza Gardens, somewhere that still had that kind of more Main Street USA vibes, because the only place I could possibly see this lamp being is New Orleans Square or Main Street USA. Still trying to figure out if there's any validity to this story at all, that they came from Disneyland or were modeled after ones in Disneyland, but this is my best guess. So the next thing that I saw in this area was, there's like not great pictures of this, but you can kind of see here on the left-hand side, as we curve around, there's a butcher shop and there is a bull head over the door. So we know that this is a bull sign because
How, dude? I think you're full of bull.
Because you can see here on the original blueprints, thank you for Distory listener Jason for sending this in. You can see on the blueprints it does say bull sign here, and it's labeled, and that's how you know that it is a butcher shop that we're actually looking at with meat hanging in the window.
Kate, did you know that bulls are powerful animals that can be unpredictable and dangerous?
No, really?
And the nose is a sensitive area, so the ring provides leverage to control the animal with minimal force.
Oh, right. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. That's why they have the thing through their nose?
Yeah. Huh. So if you're a little squeamish,
it was just jewelry.
This may make you... What?
It's just a nose ring.
This part of the podcast is called Talking Over One Another.
Please tell us about bulls, Kirk.
So, yeah, I had never looked up why they had rings in their nose. I assumed it was something with handling, but I had never seen it before. And honestly, this is kind of I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable slightly. But because that nose is so sensitive, the ring would provide attachment for ropes or leads so staffs and handlers could guide and direct the bull without having to get too close. The discomfort caused from pulling on the ring acted as a deterrent for aggressive behavior, because this would create them for like a very uncomfortable environment. So it's definitely a little sensitive for sure. And I don't know, man. It gives me the willies a little bit doing it, but that's what they do to handle such large animals.
Yeah.
So that's the real deal.
Well, thanks for sharing about the bulls.
And there's no bull about that.
So the houses here in the square are kind of like almost like a Bavarian style, with a lot of thatched roofs that we see. Some of them are thatched, some are thatched, and some are shingled. So then we also see a stop sign with a policeman who is blowing a whistle. This is something that they pulled over from the Disneyland version and then put here in 1971. And he has some like limited animation, like he's like jumping up and down, almost like jumping jacks, like all of his arms and legs are kind of like all flailing about. And we do have a great photo from our friend Jason. He's telling you to stop. We've already talked about bobbies a whole lot. So English bobbies, all the things we said before in the series still apply here with this one as well. Before we move any further in Town Square, Kirk, why don't you take us through on the video and show us what the rest of this scene looks like?
You got it. So again, we smash straight through the doors. You see the bull sign. You see those thatched roof buildings that Kate was talking about. We see our policeman, and then we see this gentleman.
Oh yeah,
what's going on with him, Kate?
Let's talk about this gentleman a little bit. This is a man with dog, is how it's described. And
okay,
you know what it reminds me of is the scene from 101 Dalmatians when like the dogs like run their leashes around their owner's ankles and they like pull them together, and then like
exactly
meet, like the meet cute and but he doesn't have any lady friend here. It's just a man with a top hat and a cane and a red jacket. His dog has run around his ankles like he's going to tip over, and he has some animation, like he's unstable because of that. So this is what he looks like when he went up for auction, just for a clearer view of him. And he has this little cravat on as well. Do you have anything you want to say about this dude? I do have this, like the maintenance records for what he looks like on the backside, which is kind of fun.
No, I want to look at the pictures.
Yeah, he's man with dog figure number 8A16, and you can see all the different parts that belong to make that animation possible to tilt him back and forth, which is real fun. And then near him is actually a man in manhole on the ground, which I haven't seen in any of these videos. But he's definitely like pops up from the ground, and he's a guy holding a wrench, kind of like a plumber with a striped shirt. And
it's a me, Mario.
And it looks like his neck is hinged so that it does open and he pops up.
Yeah, right. Like it's like the manhole cover covers it, and then you see just his head. But I think it's like this. Like it's probably limited.
But he's definitely startled that you're driving on by over his manhole. Why is he like in the dark working in a manhole with the wrench?
Yeah, I mean, he is coming up like in a pretty terrible spot, like in the middle of the road during a busy time of day.
Yeah,
like, no cones around the manhole cover. Like, give us a heads up, bud.
Yeah, not very safe. Not safety last with this dude.
Nope, safety last. OSHA would not approve of this gentleman.
There is also nearby a cobbler store. If you see in this picture here.
Is it peach or blueberry?
What? Not a cobbler.
Yeah, this is great because it took Kate like at least 2 seconds. She was in shoe mode. She was way deep in shoe mode.
I was like, why are we having peach shoes? And then I thought like Peach from like Mario.
That's what I'm saying. I had you in shoe mode locked.
Anyway, there is a cobbler because there's a boot that's hanging up here. It's almost like a heeled boot that's above the store. So that's how we know it's a cobbler, which then of course gives us that same cobbler that shows up in 1983 in Disneyland. Although this one doesn't have any like names on it, but in Disneyland, remember this was Smythe's Boots and Shoes. So I think that's why we have this shoe store here, is because of this connection back to this 1971 version. There's also a bird on the roof. Do you see the bird in a nest? And he's like, his head is like popping out of the nest. It
reminds me so much of it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
That bird, where he's like, so bad.
Yes,
it's exactly what. But I didn't get a good enough picture of it to be able to make some inferences. But
yeah, that's good. Next up, we have it's kind of like there's a couple things happening at one time here. So one of the things we see is a man on bicycle, which is a guy in a yellow coat on a penny-farthing bike. Kirk, do you want to talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, so first of all, penny farthings, I always thought these were so ludicrous looking as a kid, because how on earth does one get on that bike? But we'll get to that in a second. This is called a penny farthing bicycle from basically like the 1870s to 1880s. The penny farthing bike got its name from two different sized wheels, with the front wheel likened to a penny coin and the much smaller rear wheel compared to a farthing, a quarter of a penny. So they're denoting it to coinage as to why the sizes. That's why it's called a penny farthing, because the front one is the penny and the back one is the farthing. This style of bike allowed each turn of the pedals, because remember, there's no chain on this, so all of the movement is going directly to the axle and via that giant wheel. But with the turn of the pedals, you could drive the bike a great distance, and it also allowed for a smoother ride over cobbled streets and uneven roads. But because the riders sat a good 1.5 meters off the ground, broken bones were all too common in the event of accidents. So even worse, the position of the rider over the front axle meant that any sudden stop would caused by like hitting a stone, would hurl the rider forward head first. Hitting the ground with their head could be sometimes fatal.
Ugh.
So these were, again, 1870s, 1880s bikes. I have how to get on these bikes because I was confused and I wanted to see it. So this guy has a more modern penny farthing bike, and you'll see him use these back posts. So that front wheel, the penny, you can actually steer it left and right. That's where your handlebars are. Again, there's no chain on this bike. All of the momentum and power comes directly from the pedals onto the axle. But you can see there's little back posts on the farthing section that you can stand on, and that's how you actually get up top or dismount the way he just did. So he does it really gracefully. And they're still ludicrous, though. Like, I don't know why on earth this made the most sense out of all types of bikes, but you can see the movement. It's almost like you push forward. I don't know how you would ride this on cobblestone.
No.
But, apparently this was a better wheel system because I guess it used more power based on physics. But isn't that weird? It's like crazy looking.
Yeah. I have that it was invented in 1871 by British engineer James Starley, and it came after the development of the hobby horse and the French velocipede or bone shaker, all versions of early bikes. This was the first really efficient bicycle, so the energy you put in was actually going to move you forward. So in the late 1890s, the name ordinary began to be used to distinguish them from emerging safety bikes, which is more like the bike that we have today.
So I have a picture up of the Rover Safety Bicycle of 1885 with the saddle remade by Brooks in 1961. So this is a late 1870s style by British inventor John Kemp Starkley. He designed the first successful safety bike all the way in 1885, and it has all the basic features of standard modern bicycles, including a chain drive, which means that both wheels could be the same size, making them much more popular, much more safe, and the fact that they're a lot lower, lots less broken bones. So while you're riding your bike with your kids, don't thank the helmet. Thank the two-wheel, similar-sized safety bike.
Safety bike, yeah, which this is also when we saw women start using the bikes more, because you can imagine climbing up onto the penny-farthing with a whole bunch of skirts and bloomers and petticoats and all those things was not happening, but women could ride bikes like this, and so they had a lot of
You're saying women they're biking? Rabble.
Sorry. I can just imagine a bunch of dude in powdered wigs getting upset that they're riding safety bikes.
In our chat as well, Nowhere in Particular says it takes fewer leg pushes to cover more ground. That's with the penny-farthing, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's your draw. That's the purpose of having such a large wheel other than a small one. Because, like, if you've seen kids use tricycles, a tricycle doesn't have a train system. Like, it's such a small wheel. They're like,
it's like pedaling nonstop.
Right. Like, you remember, like, those big wheels as a kid, you'd have to really rip it and you'd be exhausted to go anywhere because the larger the wheel, the further the distance. But again, challenging to get up and highly unstable when you're all the way up that high. And you hit like a pebble. Like, you can't even see. Are there any pebbles in the road? There's pebbles everywhere. What are you doing? Get off that thing.
So we have to talk about this guy who is climbing up on the sign ostensibly to escape you as you are running towards him. And so he's climbing. Here's a picture of what he looks like when he was up for auction. He has a little umbrella hooked on his arm. He has another dude in a red jacket. So the very popular color in this area. And a hat as well. But he's climbing up this sign that says a couple different things. It says at the top, there's an arrow pointing up that says Upshire or Upshire. And down the backside, I think it says Showershire or Showershire. And then it also says Shire this, Lancashire, Shortshire, Worcestershire, not so sure, and not ? Sure. So it says different things depending on what direction you're going and looking at it from. So just really an interesting sign, a really fun idea with this dude kind of climbing up on top of it to escape you. He's wearing spats, I think, on his feet, which is fun. And
handsome. He is so debonair. Look at that parasol.
And behind him is a clothing store, so you can see that there's a pink dress and then some bolts of cloth as well that are behind him in the window.
One thing's kind of interesting is they use that style of that like bubble glass that they typically used in taverns for the second floor of that building, versus like the lower window, which you can actually see through quite clearly. So the lesser quality glass is up above, which the assumption here would probably be that the seamstress or the the dressmaker, manufacturer, all that was like their showroom and fitting area. And then up above is probably where they worked and lived. And you don't need that to be nice, proper glass. So they used lesser quality.
Yeah, I love that.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and our good friend Moogie, too, in the chat is giving me a correction, which I appreciate, saying that she thinks the architecture is more Tudor revival than Bavarian. And I think I actually agree based on all of the Tudor architecture that we went over when we first did Toad Hall way back in the day. This does tend to look more Tudor-esque. So thank you, Moogie, for pointing that out, our resident art historian. Appreciate that.
I'd say she's the Tudor on the house style.
I always love Tudor houses. They're so pretty.
Yeah. There's a lot of details in this, so my apologies that I didn't put as much time into the house style as I did.
You blew the episode!
I know. I just quit now. I'm done.
Dude, when I was growing up, I used to love going to Busch Gardens in Williamsburg because like they have a Germanic section, and in that entire section, it's all these like Tudor buildings, and I just fell in love with that architecture. It's just so cool.
It is.
And then there would be always random houses like in neighborhoods. Most of the homes where I used to live were like colonial style, and so then you'd random see these like Tudor homes, and they stuck out like a sore thumb, but like in the best way possible.
Yeah,
like a scary German guy lives there. You know what I'm saying?
Like those, or like
Squad.
The ones that are like the Victorian houses with the wraparound porches, and it was like the most beautiful house in the neighborhood that everybody wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So we have one last kind of main feature in this area before we leave town square. So the penny-farthing dude is kind of headed out towards the jail, which I think we'll talk more about the jail when we do
the other side.
Yeah, so I didn't get into it now because we're going to cover it so extensively then. But that is what is over there, and you can kind of see the doors are open here heading into the jail, which again we'll cover later. But we're headed towards this direction. We actually see right before we go into Winky's pub, where we see a mug with some foam on top, and we see Winky's as the sign. There's something to the right side of that, which is a balloon salesman. And I have to talk a little bit about this because if you are a fan of the Pixar movie Up, you would probably remember the scene with Carl, who is a balloon salesman, who's actually like holding the cart down because it starts to float up in the air with the balloons going up. And that is what reminded me so much of this particular guy in this ride. And so if you don't mind, Kirk, I would love to talk for a minute about Marc and Alice Davis in connection with the movie Up. So here is a picture of Marc and Alice together with the auctioneer, who is modeled after Marc Davis by Blaine Gibson. So I think that you probably will never see the movie Up the same after you know some of the stuff about Marc and Alice. So they were the Imagineers who inspired the Fredricksons in the movie Up. So this is all from Alice Davis. Pete Docter, who's the director, called me and asked if he could bring his animators down to see our house and go through the house in Marc's studio. And I said, sure. He brought all of them, and I was surprised because they came with all kinds of cameras and everything else known to man. And they spent at least 3 hours or more going around photographing everything inside the house, the outside the house, and Marc's studio, and so on. So this is the inside of their house. And if you've seen the movie Up and you know the chairs that they sit in, I really think that they were influenced by that one big red chair there that's in the center. Because if you can see the style of her chair, of Ellie's chair on the right, even though his chair is more red and hers is this pattern, the style of the chair to me, I'm like, I think that chair is absolutely influenced by the one that is here in Marc and Alice Davis's house. So anyway, it said the day that it opened, the movie went open, I went to see the film, and one of the young animators came up and said, do you remember me? I went through your house. And I said, yes, I remember you. And he said,
creepy.
Well, I think you'll be surprised with what you see in the film. And I said, oh, what's that? And he said, well, just see what we saw. And I don't know if you know when it's coming down the stairs in the chair, it's not the paintings that are on my wall, but there were paintings on the wall and the rail, and such was part of the house. And there were a number of things that they picked up on it. The first half hour of the film made you laugh and cry at the same time. It was absolutely, I love that film. Everybody said you have to stay with it to the very end of the credits. And when I saw my name there, I almost lost my teeth, because they do credit Alice Davis as an inspiration at the end of the film, because at this point, Marc had passed away. So if you're ever watching the movie Up and you see like, the stairs where he's taking the, little escalator thing up and down the stairs and there's pictures on the wall, that is influenced by their home here with all of Marc Davis's concept art up on the wall, which I think is just lovely. And she said at this point, wow, this is my moment of fame. And then at the Academy Awards, I was the loudest one screaming and yelling that he got the Academy Award. And then I was at the governor's ball having dinner afterward, and I was sitting at this table, and all of a sudden it was this great wham. I was sitting talking to the person next to me, and the whole table shook, and I looked, and there was the Oscar. And sending it back at me was Pete Docter, and he said, look, our Oscar. And he crammed it on the table, and I jumped out of my skin, but I leaped up and gave him and his wife both big hugs and kisses. It was marvelous, marvelous moment. I was so sorry Marc couldn't be there. But really is like they had this very, very sweet relationship, Marc and Alice Davis did. For 44 years, they were married. They fell in love on the set of Sleeping Beauty. And I love that they used their love story as an influence for Carl and Ellie in the movie Up, which I think is so special. And I have one last thing I just want to share because I think this is such a fun story that also connects them to the movie. So if you've seen the movie at all, you know that there's this Paradise Falls jar where they like put money in, they put spare change in because they're dreaming about traveling to Paradise Falls, right? But every time something happened, like they would get in a car accident or like they would, like they blow a tire or something, they would have to smash the jar and take all the coins out. Okay. So this, I think, is also inspired by Marc and Alice Davis. So they had something that they called the Anther Biz Fund. So Alice said, I had a very serious horse accident when I was young. The horse got frightened and it turned and went down the steep hill between trees, and the horse leaned out and missed the trees, but I didn't. I caught it with my left side and mashed the whole side of my face in, broke all my ribs and cut this eyelid loose and down the cheek. It was bad accident. And I didn't have any money. I was living like a lion from zebra to zebra, never knowing when the next zebra was coming along. And I had to borrow money from my brother to get out of the hospital. I didn't even have money to pay for the hospital bill. When I got home, I opened up a letter, and it was in the postbox from John and Jane Anther, whom I had met only twice in my life. And there was a good-sized check in the letter, and the letter stated that this was their fund. When they were very young and first married, a very wealthy person drove into them and demolished their car and so on, but had the money to beat them in the lawsuit and such, and they were destitute. They had no money to pay for the doctor bills, and they've had the loss, their car was destroyed. And so these people gave them money for paying off their hospital bill and paying for the car and the whole bit. And so they got a new start in life. And so they were passing on the money. The way the people gave them the money was if and when they knew somebody, they had an accident happen to them and passed the money on to them with no strings except if and when they could pass it on to somebody else. So it was a pay it forward kind of deal here. So Marc and I put so much money away each year. And we would give the Anther Biz Fund to people. And we helped a lot of people, but nobody ever knows who they are because we don't tell anything. And it helps you, like when the car's tire would burst or something. Well, that was the Anther Biz Fund to where they could get another tire and so on. So the idea of, even though they used it a little bit differently in the film, a lot of the things that she described happening to them are things that happen in the film and that they have to go to their fund and pull money out for it. So even though it's not exactly the same thing, I think this is a direct reference to the Anther Biz Fund and their way of paying it forward and helping people out, which I love.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's a fun story.
Yeah. Isn't it great? So Kirk, do you have anything to share about the balloon guy or anything that's in this corner before we move on?
I hate to inflate your ego, but here we go. Dude, I was thinking about the time period of balloons. Dude, when did we start having balloons for celebratory purposes? This whole got me onto a whole thing about balloons. So in 1824, Professor Michael Faraday created the first rubber balloon at the Royal Institution in London. So balloons first started in 1824 in England using hydrogen. And they made these by cutting round sheets of rubber and pressing the edges together and inflating them with that hydrogen. In 1847, J.G. Ingram of London began manufacturing the first rubber balloons as toys, though they were crude compared to obviously modern versions. Here would be such a crude... It almost, honestly, I don't know why on earth they had to make it veiny. It looks like it's like a sheep's bladder.
Yeah, it does.
I don't... It's does it feel again, I have another one. These all look like intestines and things, and maybe they were. Maybe that's where this came from, because this looks way earlier than the 1800s, but I found this was like some of the only renditions of early balloons. But it wasn't until the 1840 what
Like, hey kids, let's inflate these like sheep bladders.
It's totally what happened. So, but in 1840, thank God, Charles Goodyear, who you might recognize the name, created the process called vulcanization in 1844, which eventually made rubber more durable and suitable for balloons, though early balloons still remained expensive novelties. So rubber balloons were very, very expensive and only at children's parties for very, very wealthy folks. But this vulcanization done by Charles Goodyear, who you know Charles Goodyear because he's the tire guy.
Yeah.
And vulcanization was defined of using the curing of elastomers, which basically you would take sulfur and treat natural rubber and make it harder. So this would allow for utilizing them in molds or in making balls and every other type of rubber things. But the big thing that obviously Charles Goodyear is known for, making tires.
Yeah.
So that's why we still have Goodyear tires. I always thought like Goodyear, I'm like such a dummy. I always thought Goodyear was like, man, these tires are great. I'm going to have a good year. You know, I didn't realize that Charles was like he was like a real dude. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And of course, Goodyear has quite a connection back with Disney parks as well, because they sponsored a lot of the things that they would use in the speed ramps.
Yeah, or speed ramps. Mm-hmm. Speed ramps on People Mover and Pirates. Now, the only thing that kind of bothers me a little bit about this scene setting is there's like a tank on top of this balloon cart. And it wasn't prevalent using helium until much, much later on. It wasn't until like the early 1900s that they started using helium. So it was mostly just air inflated by regular folks, and then they would hang the balloons.
Yeah.
So
to the left side of Winky's pup there, we do see a watch that's hanging up like a sign for maybe a clockmaker. And the time on it says 9:22. Do you have anything else about the clock there, Kirk?
I do. So, wristwatches in general that was such a fashionable statement. And if you look at everybody in this town square, everybody's dressed to the nines. Mine is wrench dude. You know, everybody else is like pretty much in a suit. The watch store would have been selling exclusively probably larger clocks, but then lots of these, pocket watches, because wrist watches didn't really come around until much, much later on. It wasn't until like 1914. And so pocket watches were mainly 100% men. Women started wearing wristlets, which were watches on their wrists. And it was actually deemed as feminine when watches first came around because of the action of going like this versus pulling out of your jacket pocket. And then, you know, I found something that's kind of similar. This is from 1917, and you could see that the earliest wrist watches were basically just pocket watches turned on their sides. So, and that really doesn't happen until World War I, is where the act of wearing a watch on your wrist, it goes away from being a wristlet and feminized and becomes masculine, because they were worn in trench warfare. So these were called trench watches, and then they evolved to much later on. But I just thought this is a good time to talk about watches for 4 seconds.
Interesting that they considered it feminine. I didn't know that.
It was the movement of
looking at your wrist.
To have like your wrist draped and dainty and hold it versus
like a bracelet. You could think like a bracelet, having a bracelet.
Right. But like there's something psychologically too here that happens. And it's like the way that humans subcommunicate with body language. The wrist is really important when it comes to showing like safety and vulnerability, especially if you open up your wrists to somebody, you know, or you show your hands are empty. All of those things are more docile or effeminate in nature, rather than, and, you know, it goes back to like handshakes too, and like checking wrists and all that stuff, is because this is obviously a very, very sensitive area that if it were to get injured, But it's a vulnerability to showcase.
All right, before we move into the pub, we have to take a quick little break and just chat about some of the things that we have going on at Walrus Carp and Disney Cicerone. So, Kirk, what are you up to over there these days?
Yo, what up? Get on over to walruscarp.com, your spot for the latest hack snacks and fun facts. And of course, theme park clothes that don't stink. As we look to what the new is, not only do we have our Moon Man glow in the dark croc charms, we also have a beautiful little bear stuck in a stump. And then of course, I actually did change this because I like it non-distressed.
Yeah, I like this.
So we have the Semper Absurda with Toad in a couple of different colors. So yeah, get it. $26, dude. Free shipping. We're not going to hose you, man. The economy's tough. We ain't changing. Want it to be easy for you. So yeah, go grab a shirt today.
I love that you designed a shirt for this series. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, dude. It might be like a new thing where every time we have a series, I have to design a new shirt.
I think so. I think that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
For me, at Disney Cicerone, mostly what I've been working on this week is I have a new long form video out on YouTube that is all about mistakes and failures in Disney attractions. So it's a new series that I started. So it's basically some things that have happened in rides that maybe didn't go so well, or things that the Imagineers had to change over time. And that really is so that we can reflect also on how we have our own mistakes and failures. And it's a process, right? Anything like these amazing rides that we love are all in process. So that's kind of the what the series is about. This first one is about Storybook Land canal boats and 8 mistakes and failures within that. So you can watch that my Disney Cicerone channel on YouTube. And there'll be more to come soon.
Fun fact, you're already watching it, so just keep doing it. just do more of it.
Keep watching. Yes.
Do more of it.
But anyway, are we ready to head into the pub?
Yeah, why don't I take us visually through there?
So,
does that sound like a plan?
I want
Stan?
to do just a little bit of disclaimer before we go into this.
Oh yeah. Oh, you think what I just said was bad? Wait until what Kate shows you.
Yeah, so there is some artwork in here that's maybe a little bit more scandalous, but we do feel like we do need to show it because it is part of the attraction, and it would not be good to not show it. So be warned that if you're watching with children, just know that there's just a little bit of scandalous part coming up here. So on that note, Kirk, do you want to take us on into the pub?
Yeah, all I'm going to say about that is this was on the ride.
Yeah, this is... Many children saw it before.
Many children saw this. It's insane. I don't remember it as a kid.
Yeah,
but
because it goes by really fast. Yeah,
it does. All right, so we're back into the town square. We see our sign guy. There's Balloon Man, and then we are about to head into Winky's pub. So we smash through Winky's pub. We see Winky. He is twirling some beer mugs, which never do that. That's a great way to spill beer everywhere. We see we see a bartender. She's serving some beer. There's a dartboard. There's some signage up. There's some steins in the background. There's hello, little picture there. And then we're already skirting out into the barrel room.
It goes by really fast. It's on the left.
It sure does.
So
it sure does.
Let's talk about it. So this art is so Rolly Crump. He was not afraid of doing scandalous things like this in his art. He liked kind of pushing the limits of this. And of course you think of in this like hippie era, like this was the stuff that was promoted, you know? So it's, if you look in his book, it's kind of a cute story by Rolly Crump. Definitely a recommended read. He also has some other things that I can't show online because they are a little bit...
They're way worse than this.
More, yeah. So it wasn't the first time that they put something like this in a Disney ride, because you can actually see in Pirates of the Caribbean, they have some artwork that is very, very difficult to see on the actual attraction, because this is the picture that Kirk has here is very much with like illuminated. Mostly this picture is shadowed, so you can't see it, but it's in the cruise quarters part of the Ghostly Grotto. And it's called either Portrait of Things to Come or Pirate Queen. I've seen both. And it's a picture of a red-headed pirate woman lounging in the cruise quarters in Pirates of the Caribbean. The one that Kirk is showing you now is by Ed Cohn. So he kind of did the final version that went in the ride. But what Marc Davis said was that she deserved to live a good life after retiring from pirate life. So this is her It basically was the redhead who went up for auction in the original 1967 version. Now it is Red the Pirate. They've changed her storyline since then. But this is her in retirement doing lounging, and Cupid is pouring her some wine, and she's living the good life. Do you have more you wanted to say about that?
Nope.
In any case, red-headed women with no tops on seem to be something that appear in some of these rides in the 60s and 70s in the Disney parks. Moving on from Rapunzel, right underneath Rapunzel, there is a table that has, it's a barrel table with 2 barrel chairs. And this reminded me so much of the ones that they used from the Chicken at Sea pirate ship eating area in Disneyland. Had almost this exact same setup. And I thought, I'm like, what if they reused one of them? And so I looked back and forth. And I'm like, no, I think they made this specifically for the ride because they don't look the same. They're a little bit different. But to me, that's where they got the idea for this, was likely from that pirate eatery that was in Disneyland. And then Disneyland's Mr. Toad also has a table and like a seat with a table that's in the corner that we didn't see when we did Disneyland's version because we didn't have this wonderful photo by our friend Jason. So I just wanted to point out there that there's also a seat that's there, as well as a barrel table that is painted on the wall.
This infuriates me as a beer salesman. Horrible. There's something that just bothers me to my core when people label things beer, ale, lager, as if we're not talking about similar things. Beer and ale in particular really bothers me. If beer was lager, I would be ace of base, no problem. But beer is beer. That's the above family branch. Underneath, there are 2 styles of beer. There's ales and there are lagers, and it's dictated by the yeast strain. Ales are top fermenting. They are warmer fermenting, and they tend to have fruitier esters and phenols. Where lagers are cold fermented, it takes a longer process to ferment them. They tend to be smoother because the fermentation process is not as rapid. They tend to be less harsh. So think with ales can be vibrant and fruity. It does not denote color. Color is denoted from malt, but an ale, typically you think your IPAs, your pale ales, and then you think your lagers. Your lagers are those like just really, really smooth, awesome German pilsners and everything else. So beer and ale, guess what? They're the same. So they should have just wrote beer and beer instead of beer and ale. It just ticks me off because it doesn't give you any context of, like if they wanted people to know what beer was, just write beer on both of them. It would have been fine. But beer and ale, it's just like redundant and silly.
I feel like Winky's Pub is always a point of contention for you in both of these versions that we've looked at.
Yeah. Yeah, I get infuriated every time I look at it as a beer person. There's so many things that bother me. Although it is kind of fun to see, this is the first time that the steins are shown with the toppers on them.
Yeah.
That's very Germanic, and like that comes from all the way back in plague times where they didn't want flies and bugs and stuff in there because they thought that all harbored disease. So
yeah. Interesting. Well, they have a beer 5-cent sign as well on the left-hand side there. And I did look up about beer being 5 cents. Was that accurate to the time? And upon doing a little bit more research, I did discover that during Disneyland's opening day broadcast, Dateline Disneyland in 1955, Art Linkletter, who was hosting it, says from the script that Mr. Toad cars are 1903 automobiles. So that's the only place I've really seen to nail down a date for this. So it said Mr. Disney's Great Picture, Wind in the Willows, which is not what its name was, but it's neither here nor there, inspires this ride, Mr. Toad, on a 1903 automobile. And believe me, this ride is the wildest of them all. So I looked up in 1903 what was the cost of beer, and it was 5 to 10 cents a glass, depending on what you were getting. So 5 cents is accurate to this time period, which I thought was great. So
nice job getting one thing right about beer.
But it is interesting you talked about kind of more of the Germanic influences of the beer steins back there, because that's what I focused on. I focused on the barmaid, who is wearing an outfit that is very much like a dirndl, like the female version of lederhosen, and more Bavarian traditional clothes, which was repopularized in 1810 in Oktoberfest. So that's what you think of, right, as Oktoberfest with this kind of outfit, right? But that would have been fairly scandalous by 1903 society fashion. Because she has a very kind of short skirt, which really didn't come in until more like the 1920s, and she's showing a lot of her upper chest area. So
who isn't in this room?
Winky is not showing that. So I did a little bit of research about barmaids in this era in English history. And so this is an early English feminist from 1892 named Eliza Orme, did a study of barmaids concerned about exploitation of them. Eventually, she became a senior lady assistant commissioner to the Royal Commission on Labor. It's a mouthful. Put that on your business card. She did a bunch of interviews with these barmaids to see about their working conditions. And so their worst complaints of a barmaid at this period of time was attempted familiarity by the publican, the presence of low women, bad language from carters and draymen, insulting customers, being made to continue serving dangerously drunk customers, and long hours. The standard was a 104-hour work week, which is crazy pants. So she said that one of the people that she interviewed, she said that they had no food or drink from her employers except what she buys at an ordinary customer's prices. And it was really hot, very hot with gas and tobacco smoke. So it was like not great working conditions. So because of Orme's report, attempts were then made to limit or ban the employment of women in pubs and hotels, but a Barmaids Political Defense League was eventually formed to look after the interests of the estimated 20,000 women in the profession. So I found this illustration from 1897. It says, "Excuse me, miss, but could you oblige me with a clove? I got her meet her missus, and I don't want her to notice everything." I think clove is probably clove cigarette, if I had to guess, to kind of hide his beer breath, as if she wouldn't notice anything.
She might not.
I do have Winky. It looks very much like the one that's in Disneyland, but of course this version came first. So this one in Walt Disney World influenced the Winky we later see in Disneyland with the spinning mugs above his head, which Kirk wisely said, don't do that because that's not good. And then I also found this. This is Thornton's patent beer saving appliance. I don't know if we've ever seen this, Kirk, in your beer history. This is a boon to licensed victualers, a long-felt want supplied, no jugs required, no slops, no accumulations, no waste, and no bar complete without it. So it looks like taps.
Yeah, it does.
Isn't that interesting?
So those are probably hand pumps.
These ones?
So yeah, because if you look below, that's probably going into the basement, and the basement is where the beer is being stored. So that's probably like a hand pump that is pulling from or drawing from the cask below. And then, so like the hand pump you pull, and then the faucet is where the beer comes out. So it's using mechanical and pressure to push the beer up.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they probably store it in the basement just because it won't continue fermenting in the colder temperature it is.
Huh, interesting.
Plus it'll be nice and cold.
Yeah. There's a poster that's on the right side also that's really hard to see. It says, "Watch your hat." So this I looked up, and it was actually very common in pubs. So this kind of creepy picture. Don't ask about the dude's long arm. It's a story. But you can see behind him there is actually a hat rack that says "Watch your hat," and essentially is "Watch your hat, watch your hat and coat" was something they would have posted in pubs. Essentially, people might steal your stuff, so keep an eye on it is all that's about. So, and the last thing that I have about this scene is that there is a player piano, or an old-fashioned upright piano that's playing, which we don't see in the scene, I don't think, unless to the right, which we don't have any footage of. There is a piano playing that you hear the music in this scene. And I do have a comment from Matt in our chat that says, "You may have already mentioned it, but only track A has its own music loops besides the music in Town Hall plus Town Square. The music in the pub scene was synced exact length of the Town Square music," which is interesting because the music definitely sounds different in this pub than it does out in Town Square. It's playing the Merrily song out in Town Square, and inside the pub it's playing some sort of piano music that is not the same as what it is out there. So it's interesting, though. I'll have to go back and listen to that again. Thanks, Matt, for bringing that up. Do you have anything else you want to share about this scene, Kirk?
On the bottom, we have a chair rail, or not a chair rail. We have a foot rail. So I was like, wait a second. When did foot rails become a thing? So, of course, I have to talk about foot rails and arm rails and all that stuff. Real quickly, the Brunswick and Blake Colander Company was one of the leading manufacturers of these wooden bars, but they also made these foot rails. And why were foot rails important? Really plain and simple is you would go and belly up to the bar and you'd want to keep your feet out of a trough that ran below. What was in the trough?
Oh, no.
Tobacco spit, manure, because people would be walking around and there's horses, and possibly urine.
Ew.
Blech.
Ew.
So,
gross.
yes, it would help keep people from falling over if they were using it to support themselves, but there's other disgusting reasons as well. So
I thought it was
I'll
just
leave it
to
at
rest
that and
your
move on.
feet.
Yeah, well, it is kind of like that, but it's nowadays that's what it's for.
Oh, so gross. Yuck. I know this is going to be a bit of a longer episode, but that's because we would really like to get through track A. So we're going to keep going. We just have a couple more scenes to get through, and they're simpler because there's not that much going on in them. So, and we've already talked about a lot of these things in our Disneyland episode, and we went into detail about a lot of these things. So we're headed out of the pub into what's called the Keg Room. So this is where they would store, presumably, the kegs of beer for the pub. Is in this room, and you can see, I know Kirk has some more things to share about the weasels here, but I'll just show you that there's barrels, lots and lots of barrels stacked up around the room that don't have things on them like in the Disneyland version. And then they have, this is what the Disneyland version looked like, which actually did have words on it that would say fragile or danger or all those kinds of things. And this one does not. Probably because it's a keg room instead. So Kirk, do you want to take it away with what you got for the keg room?
I'm going to do something that some people will hate, some people will love.
Okay.
But we all will find adorable.
Okay.
Welcome to the story of Disney's Lying to You, Weasel Edition.
Okay.
So I was doing research on weasels because that's what people do. And I had to know, what is the difference between some of these adorable little critters? I am currently showing a picture on the left of a weasel and on the right, a ferret.
Yeah.
And you might be asking yourself, well, Kirk, why are you sharing that? There's only weasels in this ride, isn't there? Maybe. Interesting. I'm going to get back to this picture in a second. But if we bring up the original Wind in the Willows, you will notice that they mention in there wild wooders. So I'm going to read a little section from this. Stroll quietly down to Toad Hall, cried the rat, greatly excited. What are you talking about? Do you mean you to say you haven't heard? Heard what? Said Toad, turning rather pale. Go on, Ratty, quick, don't spare me. What haven't I heard? Do you mean to tell me, shouted the rat, thumping his little fist on the table, that you have heard nothing about the stoats and weasels? What, the wild wooders? Cried Toad, trembling in every limb. No, not a word. What have they been up to? Well, they've taken and how they've been and taken Toad Hall. So these wild wooders gets mentioned a couple of times, but they actually mention what these wild wooders are. And it's a combination of, if you look at how many times it's been said, stoats, the word stoats are mentioned 16 times. Foxes are mentioned twice. Weasels are mentioned 28 times. And ferrets are mentioned 6 times. So, all right, weasels are definitely the dominant creature in the literature, but there is a substantial difference between the animals themselves. Weasels being the smallest of the breed with really short tails with no black tip. Then there's stoats, which are much longer and they're bigger. And then there's ferrets, but the ferrets have that black face mask. Stick with me.
Okay.
Weasels are adorable and they're cute and they're so tiny and there's so many of them. And I love every little bit of them. So this is just a bunch of different types of weasels. Some of my favorites, the mountain weasel, the Egyptian weasel, and the Siberian weasel. Kate, do you have a favorite weasel?
I don't know. I'm just learning how cute they are. Look, the
Yes, that's all you
Malayan
need to
weasel
know.
looks adorable. They're almost purple.
They are. It's adorable. All right. Next, we go into ferrets. And why are we doing this? Why are we looking at all of these pictures of weasels? Well, because earlier on, when we're loading into this attraction, we notice that these weasels have hands, but let's ignore the hands for a second, and wearing shoes. But we notice that their face just has a white patch on their mouth. We know they're not ferrets because they don't have the black face masks, and I'll show you the ferrets again. But I don't think that they're actually weasels. They may want them to be weasels, but I don't think that they are. They're definitely not, Scandalous, right? So here is a combination of all of them. This is ferrets, stoats, and weasels. Weasels are the tiniest ones. Oh my God. I'm going to just show this picture because this is so stinking cute.
Okay.
This is stoats. Stoats, when it's wintertime, they get a white coat and they are called ermines. Oh my God. Aren't they?
Oh, that's what people made all the coats out of, which is even
oh my God.
horrible now that I know how cute they are.
Stoats are like the prettiest thing ever.
Aww.
Anyway, so weasels are the smallest of the three, typically 7 to 9 inches long. Stoats 7 to 13 inches in body length, and the largest would be ferrets at 13 to 16. But the ferrets are like all squishy and weird and all over the place, right? Like their hair is all like sprawling and they have those masks. The weasels have a white belly.
Okay.
Not all stoats have white bellies, but all of the stoats are longer, they are bigger, and they have white patches underneath. Therefore, I think that these are not weasels, but creatively, they decided to make stoats their weasel.
And like gigantic ones, because they're like bigger than these barrels.
Right. So
they're not true to
size.
size.
I think they're more in line with what a stoat looks like than what an actual weasel looks like, because stoats have more of a longer face shape and
like snout.
Snout, yes, thank you. Where weasels are more squatty and adorable. But technically, they wouldn't be wrong if it was a weasel, if it was a stoat, if it was a ferret, or if it was a fox, because all are combined in Wind in the Willows as part of the wild wooders that inhabit Toad Hall.
Well done, Kirk. Well done.
Thank you. And it was so cute, dude. They're so adorable. I am like in love with stoats, dude. I want a stoat so bad. My sister had ferrets growing up. They smelled really bad.
That's what I said.
They all
like,
have
do they
those,
all
like,
smell?
stink
The
scent.
stoats smell too?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they all probably smell.
Probably
I imagine that.
Yeah. All right. Well, the only other things that are going on in this scene is some of these barrels are tipping, which is something we also saw in the 1955 version in Disneyland. So that's kind of something they pulled from there for the animation. And I don't have anything else in the scene unless you do, Kirk.
Nope.
Let's move on. All right. So we're headed out of the Keg Room, and you see there is a blackout section. So it gets completely dark. Usually there's some sort of doors that block you out in that area. You can see the doors going into the blackout section in this layout. And then we're headed into what is known as the rain room, which there's no rain that I see. It's by the river. It's like there's forest, there's trees that we see going into this. You know what, Kirk, we should back up. Do you want to take us on a video into this section? Because we neglected to go through these two scenes.
Yeah. Let's do. We're gonna back it up. It's so quick. We'll go through Winky's again, and then we'll go into the barrel room right into the blackout scene. All right, so we're into Winky's. Close your eyes. Don't look at Rapunzel's picture. All right, there's the beer. Oh, great. Beer and ale. And yeah, you do see some animation with the barrels as they are tipping, as Kate had mentioned earlier. And then now we head into the pitch black.
This is the rain room with the trees.
You got Ratty, Moley. There's like, I don't know why that guy has like a raincoat. Well, I guess the rain room, but like, is he a signalman?
Yeah. So, okay. So back up though, because this is Ratty's house, which we saw in the Disneyland version, right? But there was no Ratty popping out of it. In this one, we see Ratty wearing a red outfit. Red seems to be really favored in this. I think maybe because of visual economy to make the characters pop out pretty quickly because you go by them so fast. I think maybe that's why a lot of them are dressed in red or bright green. He has a pipe and he has his little hat for Sherlock Holmes because the character who voiced Ratty was Sherlock Holmes in a series and so or movie. And anyway, you can see him. He's kind of like opening the door to his house, kind of stepping out and looks surprised. But his little thatched river house, and you can see then Molly is down in a boat who has animation. He's lifting his hat up and down. This is the second time we see Molly in this attraction. This is the first time we see Ratty, but the second time we see Molly because he was on the chair in Toad Hall. So I don't know why they have him twice, but he's here. Hanging out on the boat.
There he is.
Which is very appropriate for Wind in the Willows. We've already read that in a previous episode during our Disneyland version when we talked about this scene. So I won't go too far into it. But this is Ratty's house down by the river. And then there is... Oh, and this is... You can actually see this is a looking over in the Disneyland version. You can see Ratty's house there in the distance. I just thought this was a really cool picture shared by our good friend Jason. That you can see looking over from the town square scene into Ratty's house. But anyway, then we move on and you see the guy who is in fact a signalman, but he is wearing a full-on rain slicker and a rain hat and a bright yellow and rain boots because it's the rain room, which that's the only evidence of rain we see in this room, by the way, is the fact that he's wearing this because we hear some owls hooting and some crickets. But I don't even think we hear rain unless you did. Did you hear any rain in this room?
No. It was weird.
Yeah. But this is a signalman. His arms are moving up and down alternately, kind of like back and forth as he goes. You can see it's not the best pictures, but here's a close up of him, and he is holding a lantern, not a lamp. We went through that when we talked about signalmen previously. And I tried to look at like what his animation was meaning. Did it mean anything? Because we talked about lantern signals and we learned how to signal trains and whatnot. But it really doesn't. I think he just got pushed off balance. And so he's just kind of like, oh, and he's not really doing anything specific to signal anybody in the appropriate way. But then just beyond him is a railroad crossing with, it says it has the two crossed signs, just like a regular railroad crossing would have, and then lights that alternately light up and dinging. It's going ding, 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 ding. And there's also a...
Wait, hang on, my headphones went out. What did it sound like?
They didn't go out. I know they didn't.
I lost you for a second. What was
ding,
that?
Ding, 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 ding. Are you happy now? There is also the crossbar to keep you from going forward that has red and white stripes on it as well. So it's warning you too that there's a train coming. That's all that's trying to communicate there. And lots of trees around here. Now at this point, we are heading into the train tunnel. And it's actually a little bit different than the Disneyland version because there's some dark doors that close before you see the train, and then like the light starts coming towards you and it's lit up when the doors open, which is really different than the Disneyland version, whereas there's no doors at all. You just like the light just turns on and starts coming towards you. And I think it's because it's a shorter track in the Disneyland version than it is here. But it's a similar system where there's just a train that's up on a conveyor belt kind of coming towards you as you're going under it. I could not tell though if there was any like bumps on the floor. It's like really hard to tell. I didn't see any pictures with the lights on either, because you know how Disneyland has those like bars on the floor that make it so it's like you're going over the railroad ties.
Well, isn't it weird that they have those signs earlier that mention bumpy, and it almost is like the track looks like it's a little bit undulating in that one point, but you would imagine they would just do it on the ground. They wouldn't do it on the track because the track would mess everything up.
Yeah. Do you want to show them a video before I talk any more about this, a video of what it looks like going through the section?
Yeah, it's not great,
no,
but here you go.
Not.
Just like everything else. Away we go. Barrel room, then blackout section, into the countryside or the rain room.
Yeah.
Yep. You got Ratty, and then you have Molly. There's our signalman. Ding, 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 as Kate makes. There's the doors.
Yeah.
And then we smack through the doors, and here is that big old light coming towards us as it's making
And the
train noises.
and there's a second set of doors there as well, and a third set. There's like two more black sets of doors, which I think is really interesting. And then head into a hot place. But before we get there, this is what Disneyland's version looks like with the lights on in this section. Really great picture of what this looks like here with the track above with the light, just to show you kind of what this is probably looking similarly in Walt Disney World. We just don't have a photo like this of it, except for those blackout doors are different. And I really honestly think it's just shorter, because here's what Disneyland's looks like. You can see the train section in the layout is very, very short there on the right-hand side. And then if we go to Disney World's layout, you can see all the length of this train tunnel is super long in comparison to Disneyland's. So I think that's why we have all the extra blackout doors and stuff, is that they had the luxury of space in order to make this scene longer and maybe more convincing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's mostly what I have for the train, except for I do want to mention from that opening day Dateline Disneyland broadcast with Art Linkletter, he explains what this ride is to people who don't know what it is, who are watching from home. And it says the automobile goes through on a monorail, pursued through London town by police, crashing through walls, and finally goes into a tunnel. And as you go into the railroad tunnel, you apparently see a train coming in the opposite direction. You can't turn, you can't escape. There's a tremendous collision head on to the locomotive, and then I can't tell you the finish because I don't want to spoil it for you. This is a ride that not only the parents should go on with children, but the parents' parents should go on with the parents. Anyway, are you ready to move on to the final scene here on track A?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. We are hit by the train, which of course then makes us end up in a very hot place. So you can see on the layout here, we've ended up, after the blackout, we end up in HE double hockey sticks into this place has its own kinds of wiggly devils. There's lights flickering at this point, which is really different. Did you want to show the video from it?
Yeah, it's like strobing in here. It's like very pulsed.
Yeah, which is creepy in a way.
Mm-hmm. It's also, you're hearing the wiggly devils go like, it's really scary. It's actually horrifying.
Yeah. And
it's very short too. In comparison to Disneyland's, their hex scene is very, very short in Disney World.
Yeah. And there's also like these volcanoes with like lava coming out of the top is what it looks like miniature volcanoes. There's lava flowing everywhere. It's very interesting. And we definitely get more
erupting. More
of the like the psychedelic feel from it as well, with the way the flames are stylized. Very Rolly Crump. We have a different kind of wiggly devils than we do in Disneyland. They're not the same. There is 10 altogether. There's 8 on the right and 2 on the left. And they have these longer pitchforks than the Disneyland version. They're also more like, they have their legs tucked up, but they don't have the long tails like Disneyland does. And they look more sinister. Honestly, I think the Disneyland ones are super cute, but these ones look like they're leering at you. Like, here's the Disneyland ones. They're like these cute little wiggly devils. And then there's like the Disney World ones, which are frightening. So I think they're both cute, but I prefer the Disneyland ones. No surprise there.
Yeah, they are much more terrifying here. I actually have a really good up-close picture of, I don't think this was from an auction, but they were on, I think this was part of a museum piece, but they are very sinister looking. And yeah, no tails.
I also have this little maquette which is basically what they use to sculpt before they make the final sculpts of the wiggly devil or the cow devil, as they're called, because of the little horns, which we did a deep dive into these critters in the Disneyland version when we explored this scene in Disneyland. So, and Kirk found a really interesting connection to a Santa Monica version that Imagineers might have explored that these might have originated from. So if you missed that episode, make sure to go back and listen to that if you want to know more about this scene in general and why it's here. But anyway, there's all these guys that are seated around everywhere. And then I also wanted to talk about the pop-up Satan that is in here. And in that video we saw that Kirk played, he is not, he doesn't actually like animate and pop up. But he does in most versions. He maybe wasn't working the day that was recorded, but he does actually pop up like that. I think that this Satan popping up, this animation was actually pulled from some very early concept art is my guess. I don't think that this came out of nowhere because Bruce Bushman actually made some very early browline concept art for Disneyland's version before it opened in 1955. And it had a pop-up Satan in it, which looked like this on the left-hand side. So this is like the whole heck scene and it says devil lunges on it. And it says oversized devil rises. I think I can give you a closer up view of it here. But you can see that it is this giant Satan that kind of like pops up from something, which is not something we see in the Disneyland version. We see instead in the 83 version, we see like the judge kind of leaning out and we see the dragon, but we don't see anything like this in Disneyland at all. But in this version in Walt Disney World, it pops up. So I wonder if they went back to some of this original concept art and pulled some ideas from it, because I think that's...
Yeah, like the fact that the devil's rising up makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also found, just to kind of give you some of these other brown line sketches from this scene, this is for Disneyland. They did use this part. And remember, we talked about the Jaws of Hell. And so this is a brown line sketch from Bruce Bushman for the Jaws of Hell, which of course ended up looking like this in Disneyland and then later like this in 1983. And again, thank you, Jason, for these amazing photographs of the Disneyland version. We appreciate it so much to have those. And one other thing I want to mention before we leave these concept art from Bruce Bushman, there's another one that's called the Pearly Gates. I don't know if it's for the heaven version or if it's for a denied entry into heaven. It could be either one. So remember, like the Motor Mania concept that they had, he was actually going to go into heaven instead of the hot place. And it was going to have like angels singing and like, gently undulating, and then it would have the pearly gates. Well, this seemed to be in a collection with the other ones I just showed you. And I was thinking, I'm like, well, would that be possibly something that they were considering? Is there would be the pearly gates. If you look on the corner here, it says pearly gates open and then clang shut. So to me, it's like, did they see the pearly gates and then they close and you don't get to go there? And instead you're going to a different place. And so it says sainted heaven on the top of this. It says cut out clouds, chorus, and then the gates open and clang shut. So I wonder if this was going to be a gag that they were going to put in there, that there was actually going to be pearly gates that were open and then clang shut, and then you end up going somewhere else.
Where they could have done that is where maybe that's why we get 3 doors, is because that gag should have been in there in like maybe the second door or the third door.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this would have been for Disneyland's version. So I don't know where they would have put it. Maybe they didn't have room for it, and that's why they cut it all together. But it would have been a really
I'm saying
idea.
like if they pulled the Devil Rising thing and brought it into Disney World, maybe they were thinking about doing this, and that's why they had those multiple doors, but they just were like, it's not going to work. Just whatever. It doesn't matter.
That is interesting.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because like, why would you sequence 3 doors?
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, could be.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
I mean, because I know that like they're trying to have one set of doors would have been sufficient to block it out from the strobe lights, so you wouldn't see them while you're in the train. But having 2, it would make sense to potentially have the second one be like the gates of heaven. Oh, that's interesting. The interesting theory. Yeah. So anyway, so this is an idea. The idea that it says open and clang shut to me tells that this was in the works when they were working on the hot place plans for Mr. Toad, at least in Disneyland. So anyway, that was kind of what I had for this scene here. Do you have anything else you want to share about?
I do. Okay. Can you pull up the devil real quick?
Yeah, I got him up. He's there.
I bet you do. All right.
Thanks for that.
So
what are you trying to say?
No, it was just funny, dude. It was like cracked me up the way it was said. I immediately when I think about the iconography that they're using here, I had to go back and try to find things that were relevant from the time period. The devil gets used in cartoons from like the 1800s all the way into the 1900s, but like culturally relevant time frame, the closest thing I could find was from a competitor with Looney Tunes. And Looney Tunes had a short that was called Devil's Feud Cake. And it involved Yosemite Sam, the devil, and Bugs Bunny. And Yosemite Sam was feuding with Bugs Bunny, and Bugs Bunny, he ends up actually falling out of an airplane, crashes all the way through to heck, and the devil goes, Yosemite Sam, you're here early, but I'll let you go back to Earth if you take care of Bugs Bunny for me. And so that's where we get this character with the sharp eyebrows, the mustache, the goatee. Like, to me, it's got all the iconography that's similar to what we're seeing here.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
So, and then I do have, I was able to find a little bit of video from it. So, yeah, it's Yosemite Sam's like holding up in the sky Bugs Bunny, and he falls out, but then he ends in the hot place. But look at him, dude. He's ascending into the depths and
descending.
Yeah, descending. Sorry. Yeah. And then look.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good find.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
What's even better is he does such a poor job dealing with Bugs Bunny at the end that the devil goes, "What are you doing? You never got bugs for me." And he goes, "You know what? Forget it. It's too much work. I'm not doing it. I'm staying here." Then Yosemite Sam dresses up like the devil himself. And I like that he looks like a wiggly devil.
He does. Oh, that's
Isn't that
funny.
so fun?
I love that.
So I don't know.
That's a great
Again,
find.
I just, trying to make some connections, and I thought that was a fun one.
Oh, I love that. That's
So, yeah.
great. So at that point, then that is that's all.
That's all, folks.
I think that's pretty much sums up Mr. Toad's track A. And we have to do, and because we didn't say it in this episode, why does Mr. Toad end up in the hot place? Basically, they just did it to make you laugh. That was the only reason. So again, they were planning on heaven in some of the earliest concepts back in 1955, but they clearly established it in Disneyland that this actually made people laugh and it was silly and funny. And so by the time they put it here in Walt Disney World in 1971, it was already a given that this is where Mr. Toad had to end up, even though it doesn't happen in the movie or the book. And it's just silly. That's all it is. So that's why he ends up in the hot place. So, Kirk, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
Did we say hell once?
No, you did now. Congratulations.
Yeah, all right, you got to get yours out before we close. You get one.
Oh, this hell was really, really freaky compared to the one in Disneyland. I think Disneyland's is cute and silly, and this one is scary.
Ours is really
It's
creepy.
horrifying.
I'm going to be honest. The more we do this, and I know I had nostalgia because I grew up with the Walt Disney World. Disneyland's really is better.
Yeah, even though there's 2 tracks in Walt Disney World, I prefer the
It's not that it doesn't
1983
matter.
version of Disneyland. I think is superior. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being with us. We appreciate you so much, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Distory.